Thank you, Sylvia, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I'm lucky enough and honored to serve as the 2019 Regional Chair for Citrus Valley Association of Realtors and West San Gabriel Realtors. I have to keep the association out of there since we just recently changed our name. Anyway, so I have the honor of kind of, for lack of a better word, herding sheep. And I'm sure some of my other esteemed colleagues that have been the regional chair here before would testify to that. But anyway, we just spent the greater portion of last week in downtown LA for our recent fall conference. And I don't know how many of you have been to downtown LA in that particular area down by LA Live recently, but I know I, for one, the time that I spent down there, I was actually absolutely shocked. Just the transformation and the build-up and revitalization and everything that's going on down there, and the walkability and everything. It's just amazing from where we were at down there, maybe even less than 2 or 3 years ago. That what I'm seeing down there is people are starting to realize that the urban environment, and this is just my opinion, is starting to creep out into what were used to be perceived as suburbs, where now I kind of believe that this area, San Gabriel Valley, is now starting to become urban because we don't have much choice. It's just because of the amount of people and the people that want to come here, although with all the recent changes in the state legislature that we've had recently, that may be making people change their thoughts on that, because if you're in business, you're a small businessman, I don't need to tell you that the business environment sure isn't becoming all that friendly, and hasn't been so for quite some time, and getting, in my opinion, increasingly worse. With that said, I would like to have some of my colleagues that attended the conferences in LA come up and just provide you with some overviews and insights on maybe one or more of the meetings that they went to, and of course they're also free to express their opinions on some of the things that I've mentioned, or other things as well. So with that, I would like to call Yinber up to the podium, and she will give a report on the Pathway Project.
Thank you, Tom. I'm a member of the C.A.R. Strategic Planning and Finance Committee, and I'm here to give you an update on the project that C.A.R. is looking into. It's called Pathway to Homeownership. And as you know, C.A.R. owns the building in LA at 525 South Virgil Avenue in Los Angeles. And we are exploring, or C.A.R. is exploring, the possibility of redeveloping this site to build affordable workforce, retail, and for sale housing. And on top of that, they're going to redevelop the site to accommodate a new office building as their headquarters. Right now, there's an office building there, which was built in 1965, and it needs a lot of retrofitting, and it's financially not feasible to have that done because the building is older. So right now they're exploring the possibility of doing a workforce housing project, and the pathway is called Pathway to Homeownership. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to put the money where our mouth is, because C.A.R. and we as realtors are advocating affordable housing, we're advocating home ownership. So this is a project for all of us. So some of the objectives of this project are, number one, is to provide affordable housing for individuals and families in the 150 down to 50% range of area median income. And that's to address the state's housing crisis for nurses, firefighters, teachers, police, and others who are eligible. So mind you, this is a workforce affordable housing. So therefore, professionals like nurses, firefighters, teachers, police, and those. So, and 14 of these units would be set aside for veterans who are in the lower income range. And we want to design a modern and efficient office facility to accommodate the association's headquarters, as I've just mentioned. And we want to create a model project which can serve as the basis for similar projects throughout the state, especially for local association of realtors which own their own property and which is financially sustainable. Another objective is to achieve a green building. And we also want to demonstrate to our association members, the state legislature and local governments that C.A.R. is a leader in advocating for affordable workforce housing in California. So to this date, we're still exploring all the possibilities and we're going through entitlements. So at our last Board of Directors meeting on Saturday, the Board of Directors approved us, the C.A.R., to go through or to continue with exploring this project. And in order to do so, they also approved an additional $406,000 for expenses in obtaining the entitlements or exploring the entitlements. So we are also looking into different alternatives to this project. Either, we may be able to spend some reserves that C.A.R. has, or donating or selling the property, as well as other options. So that's it.
Thank you, and that was great information. And if you do have other questions, they would probably be best addressed to C.A.R. And if anybody does have any questions, just let Ian or I know, and we can get you to the right person to ask those questions. So we'll move right along to taxation, and our president-elect, please welcome Nick Mulvey.
Thank you so much. And yes, I'll be covering taxation and government finance. I'm probably one of the few human beings on the planet who can find that exciting, but I'll try and make it interesting for you guys too. We had 3 action items that came out of that particular committee. 2 I should be able to get through reasonably quickly. The other one I do want to spend a little bit more time on. So the first one is that C.A.R. support SB 561 Glacier that would prohibit a local government from giving a portion of the sales tax revenue that is generated by a retailer to that retailer in return for the retailer locating within the jurisdiction of that local government. Number 1, the grammar is awful there. Number 2, the background to this is back in the days when we functioned solely with brick and mortar stores, cities would basically give a portion of the sales tax income that they get. Sales tax 1% goes back to the city, just if you're not aware of that. The cities would cut a deal with retailers, so if a grocery store came in, they would say, we'll give you a portion of that sales tax if you'll locate in our city. Now, the retail world has changed significantly over the last 20, 30 years with online retail, but the tax law hasn't. So for example, the city of Cupertino gets a portion of sales tax every time Apple sells something online, because their headquarters are located in Cupertino Cupertino cut a deal so that Apple would come there, and that has created a huge bonus for Cupertino. Apple benefits, which is great, but it's not a housing-friendly policy. Because what this does is it makes cities zone commercial, because there are incentives for them to go with commercial. And as we are very, very aware, and Yin alluded to with the Pathways to Home project, we're in a housing crisis. We really, really need housing, and disincentivizing zoning residential isn't something we should be doing. Now, this bill is already on the governor's desk, if it hasn't been signed already, so we've just put our names behind that. The second one is that C.A.R. reaffirms its existing policy in support of the mortgage interest tax deduction. You guys are very familiar with the mortgage interest tax deduction. I think the only question will be, why are we reaffirming our policy? Well, C.A.R. is going to send directors to NAR in about a month. And this basically gives our NAR directors marching orders that say, we really back this. We really want to preserve and even improve the mortgage interest tax deduction, because believe it or not, there are states that don't really care about that. There are states where the mortgage interest tax deduction is seen as something for the incredibly wealthy because their home price points are significantly lower than ours. Whereas for us, the mortgage interest tax deduction is the difference between a working family being able to afford a home or not, in a lot of cases. So those are the two relatively quick ones. The other one is that C.A.R. proceed with signature gathering to qualify the California Home Fairness and Primary Residence Act for the November 2020 statewide ballot. Now, the California Home Fairness and Primary Residence Act is Proposition 5. It is our second attempt at this. As you know, it was on the ballot at the last election. It didn't make it. Our focus shifted to Proposition 10, which we did defeat, and luckily the legislature listened and never thought about enacting rent control statewide again. Oh wait, no they did. But we're trying to do something positive with Prop 5. For those who don't remember, it is about people being able to transfer their tax base anywhere within the state. Prop 60 and 90 allow that in a limited function. The Home Fairness Act, formerly Prop 5, would make this statewide, and it would make it a bigger benefit. You'd be able to trade up if you were a senior or disabled individual transferring, and you would only pay the increased property tax on the basis above what you sold for. There are some... Bob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, when I brought this to C.A.R. almost 12 years ago, it was from the Florida Tax Portability Act.
Correct.
And that crosses the line for every property owner. I don't know why C.A.R. keeps dwelling on seniors and disabled people only. If we want to get this through, let's make it for every homeowner, allow them to transfer their property tax, because then we get more voters in favor of it. You're dealing with such a small pool of seniors and disabled people. Spread it across the whole board. I don't understand the philosophy.
So the short answer to that is it would cost the state far too much.
It wouldn't cost the state anything. I would sell my house and she bought it, they would get new taxes on my house, where I'm only paying $2,000, they're gonna get $16,000 when she buys it.
Well, they would get new taxes if it was a first-time home buyer, but if everyone was able to transfer their property tax basis,
Right.
anyone not engaged in a first-time home purchase or coming back into the state from outside would be transporting their basis. Now, if I could just finish. We had opposition because of the legislative, last time, because the Legislative Analyst Office basically came out with a report saying this would cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars over years, which we disagree with wholeheartedly. There are some changes to this act to help pay for that, which includes some adjustments to the intergenerational transfer tax. So you would, intergenerational transfer tax, you keep your tax basis when you inherit property up to certain amounts. That would remain if the heir lived in the primary residence, but it would go away for those who inherited a property and either didn't live in it or it was income property. Now, that change means the Legislative Analyst's Office has turned around and said, well, now this more than pays for itself, it actually generates money for cities and for the state. So that should hopefully remove that opposition that we will be dealing with. And for those who are concerned about giving away something, there is already a bill, SCA3, that would do away with that intergenerational transfer tax. It is on the books, it is on the slate in the Senate. It will probably come back in the next year or two. And SCA3 gives us absolutely nothing in return. It would just be the legislators looking for revenue at the end of the day. So there would be no intergenerational transfer tax. There would be no benefits along those lines. There's also another portion to this, which is working around a corporate workaround that stops reassessment of properties. Currently, if corporations change ownership in portions, then the property they own isn't reassessed. So instead of selling a warehouse that your corporation owns, you sell the corporation, the warehouse isn't reassessed, which means commercial properties in a lot of cases aren't reassessed for decade upon decade upon decade. That's in there partly to help pay for the intergenerational transfer tax. It's also in there to try and combat split roll to a degree. Because if we say, well, we're dealing with a big issue in the commercial property tax world, then it takes away some of the argument for split roll as well. So in answer to your question, we are trying to pay for this. I understand the Florida model, and I understand it has a much wider benefit. The feeling with the full Florida model is that we would face so much opposition, we would be so totally buried that we would never get this through in a vote. Just so you know, we also have a legislative alternative that's on the go as well. It doesn't include the corporate bit, but it includes everything else in there. So once we gather signatures, we may actually be able to get this through a legislative option, and we wouldn't necessarily have to run the full campaign or the campaign to the extent that we would have to just with our ballot initiative. And again, if those of you who remember that the signature gathering process last time involved an extra $100 assessment, the funds are being found in C.A.R.'s reserve, so there will be no additional assessment for the signature gathering portion. Once we've gathered signatures, the decision in May will be whether we go ahead with the campaign if we've gathered enough signatures. Has that covered your question, at least to a point?
You covered it. I'm not satisfied, but you covered it.
I fear, Bob, that is the closest I'm going to get. Does anyone else have any other questions? Seeing none, I will get out of the way and let my colleagues speak.
Thank you, Nick. And now Susie Guntel-Soto will give us a legislative update. Susie?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Susie.
This year I was on a few committees at C.A.R. I served as chair of Association Leadership President's Forum, and that is there's 103 presidents across at different associations, like our president Giuseppe, counterparts around. So it was a great committee in speaking and helping current leadership and future leadership. I also served as a member on the federal committee, on local government forum as the NAR rep, and on legislative committee as your Region 13 rep. So I'll be sharing with you some of the action items from legislative committee. And the legislative committee has other committees that kind of funnel up to us, so the motions that passed or failed through there come to legislative, and we approve them, or after a great discussion, they fail, and then it goes to the board of directors as well. So 3 of those committees that had action items are homeownership housing, transaction and regulatory, that Karen Hewitt is the Region 13 rep, And Taxation and Government, as Nick Baldry is the region rep for that committee. He covered the greatly discussed and pained discussion of the California Home Fairness and Primary Residence Act, the ballot initiative. On Homeownership Housing Committee, one of the items was an action item, a motion that C.A.R. sponsor legislation to require cities and counties to reduce impact and development fees imposed on affordable housing units proportional to the affordability of the unit. The motion passed in Home Ownership and Housing, it failed in Legislative, and then it passed at the Board of Director meeting. So it's a very sensitive topic. So some of the discussion was, if we continue, with housing permits right now are down more than 15% from what was first half of last year. So if we continue on that track, we will be at 107,000 units a year, which is far below what Governor Newsom wants of the 3.5 million units by 2025. So a lot of discussion came, there's already incentives offered to developers that are building affordable housing units, whether it's not enough, but we figured that's where we need to go, and in the end that's, the motion did pass. The second action item out of Homeownership Housing was that C.A.R. sponsored legislation to require that the California Affordable Housing Cost Study, which was last received or reviewed in October of 2014 by the Department of Housing and Community Development, be updated in order to better understand the cost difference between constructing affordable housing versus market rate housing. That did pass in all three, Housing, Legislative, and the Board of Directors. That really did require much discussion. It was kind of a no-brainer. In the Transaction and Regulatory Committee, there are a few items. Actually, there's 3 action items. The first was that C.A.R. support AB 687, authored by Daley, which allows brokers as LLCs, if amendments are taken that would require those LLCs to carry mandatory errors and omissions coverage, unless those amendments have previously deemed as unacceptable amendments by C.A.R. directors, C.A.R. Board of Directors, excuse me. And there is a list of 3 that are unacceptable amendments. If anyone has questions, I can go through those with you. The second item is that C.A.R. sponsored legislation to permit a licensee to be able to continue to use their prior surname in their business dealings despite a legal name change. And that was approved in Legislative Committee. So let's say I'm Susie Dunkel. I get married. I'm Susie Soto. This would allow me to be able to use Susie Soto. I could continue using Dunkel if I'm known in business as Susie Dunkel, and legally as Susie Soto. So it'll allow you. I didn't realize that this was even an issue, but then I went Dunkel Soto, so it doesn't affect me. But there's a lot of primarily females that grow in their business with their name, but it differs from what their legal name is. So we're sponsoring that is allowed. And the last item out of Legislative Committee, there's a few out of Fed, but I won't cover those today. That C.A.R. sponsored legislation to either add an alternative or change the agency confirmation in statute. And the agency confirmation is the form that we use. The first point in contact that we use when we're working with our clients, kind of declaring who we are and the relationship we have with them. So with that, those are my items. I just know we're a little pressed for time, so I'll let Lee. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie, that was great. Lee, you want to come up and clean everything up? Tell us how things really are in the political environment?
Well, Tom, thank you. That's a perfect introduction. Who remembers Otto von Bismarck's famous quote, politics are like sausage, better not to see them being made? Well, unfortunately, we saw how it was made this last couple of months. And I'm going to start off with some good news. First of all, in 2014, 48% of the realtors voted. 48% of the eligible realtors voted in 2014. 2018, 77.6%. So all of Nick's efforts on getting out the vote and all of our efforts on Prop 5 and Prop 10 really paid off, and we did a fantastic job of mobilizing our base. Now, going from that, we won on Prop 10, and that was good. You might say, well, what good does it do to win on rent control when the legislators just turn around and implement rent control?
Right.
And in fact, by show of hands, who owns rental income or has sold multifamily rental income in California? Quite a few. By show of hands, how many of those are affected by rent control? Very good. Should be all the same hands because California now has statewide rent control. So, Bob.
Can we challenge that in the courts through C.A.R. because we voted it down and then some dumb group of politicians, I think you said they were, passed it against our will?
Yes.
To me, that's a lawsuit that C.A.R. should file.
I didn't hear any talk about that.
Well, but
But
that's
what I
what
did
you
hear,
bring up.
what talk I did hear was putting it back on the ballot because we won it at the ballot and we could take it back to the ballot. I don't think C.A.R. is going to do that,
Well,
but
wait a minute.
I would support it if they did.
The people voted and then some dumb group of people pass it.
Yeah. So what they did was, if you listen to the politicians, you won't hear any of them, except those who voted against it, use the words rent control. This is
Stabilization.
anti-gouging
And discrimination.
and discrimination. So they're playing it off. There's like a component where they were gouging after the fires up north, Paradise fires, and everybody was charging more for the hotel rooms and the rentals. So that's a gouging. We'll all accept that. They're playing this off as part of gouging. So
But we have a housing shortage.
absolutely, and this doesn't help build one new unit, not one. In fact, it discourages building, right? Because you're less likely to build where there's rent control. You're preaching the choir.
That's right.
Okay, so let's see, Nick hit on Prop 5, which we're going to see again in some form or another. Okay, I already brought up 1482, which is the rent control. The sausage part of this was we went to our governor and asked him, well, he came to us, first of all, and said, I think there's a deal to be made here. We reluctantly tried to reach a compromise. He asked us to negotiate with these 4 different groups, which were primarily housing groups. We came to a conclusion, a resolution with those 4 groups, and he came back to us and said, that's not enough. And so there's really a strained relationship between C.A.R. and the governor now going forward because we felt like we were not dealt with honestly. Okay, another bad idea. Anybody, but this is out of Washington, D.C., which debunks the theory that all bad laws start in California. Tenant's first right of refusal. Anybody heard of that one?
Yeah.
So tenant's first right of refusal is you have a house and you're leasing it out and you decide to put it on the market, your tenant would have the first right to purchase that. And it's not, you wouldn't have an opportunity to put it on the market and see what the market will bear. They would have an appraisal process that they would institute. Let's see. Shoot.
That's enough.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Is that a new bill that they're
No,
trying to pass?
it's not. They're talking about it. They're talking about it.
Because then basically, the value of that landlord's home would be based on what that tenant could qualify. And if they have a minimum, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's.
Could be.
I mean, the appraisal, but still, it doesn't,
But that's stupid idea.
I hope not, that's
That's
crazy.
what we've been saying for years.
Yeah.
That's the people you vote in,
So-
you gotta start voting.
So there's two things. Also, so there's the California Coastal Commission has been wreaking havoc on the coast. It doesn't directly affect us, but I know many of you own property along the coast, and some of you sell property along the coast. I see heads nod. And so we've started a group called Smart Coast California. So if you're interested in that, it will be up and running shortly, but it's called Smart Coast California. The other one, kind of in that same vein, is we're fighting some issues with energy, where they're going to mandate homes to be solar, outfitted with solar. They're going to make it very difficult to have gas, so that you're going to have, everything will be powered by electric. We're participating with a group called California for Balanced Energy Solutions, and it's C4BES.org. So C4BES.org. So, any questions? Vince?
I spoke with the assembly person on the dispatch 34 about 1482, and what she says, well, what you guys want, we give 5% plus a CPI on the rent increase. And my question to her, I said, well, you guys are missing the boat, because apparently what you guys are doing, it's not the number is more than good for us, but the number is better for the poor people, because you put my tenant on the schedule every year from now on, when I haven't paid the rent for years on the side.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. Bob?
You know, what they truly do not understand in Sacramento is that every time somebody crosses that border, it puts more pressure on our housing in California. And because those people have to live somewhere. And so they may live in San Diego, but that puts pressure on Oceanside, that puts pressure on Long Beach, puts pressure on LA. Those people all have to live somewhere. And so the housing shortage is getting worse because they won't close the border. So they need to understand you can't keep putting more people in that funnel without causing more problems. And so that means our rental properties can no longer build because it's difficult to get financing on them now. I met with
Bob, the silver lining is everywhere they've tried it, rents have gone up. And so all your rents are going to go up.
I know I got a bunch of
So as you can see, there is a lot of stuff going on up in Sacramento. Just by a show of hands, how many of you participated in the most recent calls to action for these last couple bills that came up? Okay, so this is a direct reflection of what's going on in Sacramento and at the Realtor level. The people that are on my right, my esteemed colleagues, we can't do it alone. We're a very small percentage of people trying to lobby to protect private property rights, to try to eliminate all this crazy legislation that impacts our livelihood and our profession. And we want them to be sustainable, we need other people's help. When there's call to action, we need to mobilize. When they were talking about signature gathering to put Prop 5 back on the ballot, one of the arguments against that was, why? Our own members don't even care. They don't mobilize. They don't take the calls to action. They don't care. Why should we? Why are we going to spend millions and millions of dollars to try to get this back on the ballot, even though we think that we might win this battle? So I would ask each of you to, at the very least, if you don't want to get involved at the committee level here, at the very least, when you get a call to action or anything that requires something, in my opinion, that's so minimal as to pick up the phone and make that call for something that is so critical and so vital to our profession long-term and for sustainability of it, it would be greatly appreciated, I think, by many of us. And with that, I would like you to join me in giving a big hand to these people, because they truly are the ones, along with the other directors that are not here today or who did not report. They are the people from this association that do the heavy lifting on your behalf, and that's what a portion of your dues dollars go to. So please join me in giving them a big hand for taking time away from the business schedule to do this.